The conversations are important because once those people are gone, you can't get that information back. Every time a person dies, it's like a library burning down.
Privilege is all around you. It's useless until you recognize it. So it's time to stop feeling guilty and figure out how to use your privilege to make an impact.
I'm Amber Cabral, and this is Guilty Privilege. Welcome back to another episode of Guilty Privilege. My name is Amber Cabral, and today I've had the opportunity to talk to Nicka Smith. She is a genealogist, a photographer, and there is a long list of things that I cannot include here because I will eat up the entire episode. And I instead would rather you lead into our really, really rich conversation about why it's so important that you document your history, the equity and privilege in actually knowing where you have come from, how important it is that you keep the information that you come across from your own family members and ancestors. And also, and probably the most important thing in this conversation is that you talk about what it is that you're doing in your life so others can find you. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Oh, I am excited to be here with you finally.
I know, right? I feel like we did a podcast a long time ago, but we didn't have the benefit of visual at that time.
That's very true. I mean, the landscape has changed
Absolutely.
quite a bit, right?
Totally different world.
Yeah. Well, you have to have companions because people listen differently now.
Absolutely.
Like, it's not just, oh, you have to see the visual if you're just in the video. You have to have both. So.
And I think social's different. So now we're like thoughtful about, oh, I have to have a soundbite and I want somebody to be able to see something.
Right.
So it's a whole experience. And I'm so glad we get to enjoy it.
I know.
Please, can you tell us what you do, Nicka? I think you have the most interesting job. It's so yummy. But can you talk to us about what you do? How would you describe what you do?
I'm a storyteller.
You're a storyteller. Absolutely.
I'm totally a storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I live and breathe and exist in every day.
Yep.
And it's just, it comes naturally because I come from a family of storytellers.
Yep.
I don't even think I thought about it like that until
yeah, it still started coming together.
Right.
But you have a lot of mediums. So you're familiar with being behind a camera. You also take photos, so being behind a camera that way as well.
Right.
And then storytelling from a genealogy standpoint, which is the thing that I, mostly am enamored with that you do. All of those things kind of unite to kind of create this like powerful storytelling vehicle.
Right. The cornucopia of Nicka.
The cornucopia. Listen, I was told earlier, they asked me not to use any big words. I wonder if that would have been on their list.
Well, I mean, most people are familiar with cornucopia for like
because of
projects.
The holidays,
right?
Too.
Because of the holidays,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it for me, storytelling pulls in all the different aspects of things that I like, whether it's history or whether it's visuals with photography or video. Whether it's stills, whether it's documents, like it's genealogy really kind of pulls all that stuff together.
I know so much of your story already. Man, I have two pieces I really want you to talk about, but I'm going to leave with this one. The very first time that we talked and we did a podcast interview, we talked quite a bit about your journey to uncovering your own history. It's such a good story. And I know we have a limited amount of time, but can you share at least a sliver of that? Because I feel like the way you talk about that really excites people into wanting to explore their own genealogy. Like I remember after talking to you, I was like, I have to talk to you about my family. I don't even know where to begin. It was so impressive to me that you had connected so many dots and had so much information from what perceivably could have been very little. And then all of a sudden it was just like, this amazing story comes out. Can you share a little bit of that with us?
Well, I mean, for me, my curiosity started as a child. Coming from a family of storytellers, I was constantly hearing different things about this person or that person in my family tree, whether it's the outlaws in the, Indian territory and the Wild West on one side, or it's the civil rights movement on the other. That was just natural for me, and that curiosity and rolling out that family tree on the table that my cousin put together, which, when we were talking before, I was telling you about this cousin.
Exactly.
Professor, Wayne State, Oakland University in Chicago, or not Chicago, I'm saying Detroit.
Yeah, in Detroit.
Detroit. But in my family, Chicago and Detroit are synonymous because those are two different places.
It's the Midwest.
Right. But it's like, It's Milwaukee, it's Chicago, and it's Detroit.
Okay.
And those are the three places that my family
have
ended up.
Anchors.
Right.
Okay.
And they migrated in some ways in between all three at some point. So sometimes the people in Chicago went to Milwaukee, sometimes they went to Detroit, vice versa.
Very culture rich cities.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Great food.
Great food.
Great people.
I mean, very, very diverse also. Like lots of Black folks in those cities too.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, I mean, in addition to, cultural stuff. In fact, I was talking yesterday about how when St. Patrick's Day happens, we have to eat the customary Irish dish at my house. And I remember being a kid being like, why are we eating cabbage? We're eating cabbage on St. Patrick's Day. We're not Irish, but my mom and my dad were raised in Chicago.
And in Detroit, we do the same thing.
Right.
We are going to, we are going to absolutely have corned beef and cabbage. Right. It is a thing I still prepare. Yeah. Which reminds me, this is so random, but I have to share this with you. So we talked about my family tree years ago. I found out that my last name is supposed to be McCoy. Really? Isn't that a yummy detail? I was like, I can't wait to tell her this. Yes. Whoa. My last name is supposed to be McCoy. So, of course, the corned beef and cabbage just brought that to me at the most awkward time. I was like, wait.
Right. It was like,
so yeah. So we can dig into that later. But yes. So yes, absolutely. So your family was between these three locations.
Right. I mean, and really honestly, if you look at my mom's side, we're in 25 states and 4 countries. My dad's side is really pretty much isolated, mostly to Kansas City, Kansas, and in California. But as a kid, the stories and just hearing different things and kind of being the collector. And I don't think I necessarily at a young age thought of myself as being like the story collector or the history collector, but I was just naturally the person that was there when you were curious was talking. Too. Right. I was curious and nosy. Right. All of that. For the first part of my journey, I was really more collecting names. And then as time went on, I started to worry more and be more concerned about the dash between the dates and who those people were and what lives they lived and like how their decisions and things sewed into who I became or maybe other people in my family, who they will become. That's really, I think, just being curious, liking to talk to people, being in relationship. And it's so funny because some of my really good friends are like, I don't know how you manage so many relationships with so many people.
You do a great job with that. You do a great job with that. You don't miss a beat.
I will, because for me, it's not like your journey is a part of mine. And so like, as I see you ascend or do things like
you're connected to it.
Right. Like it's hard for me. It's really hard for me to disconnect. And so like for you, like I'll just be like, oh, let me make sure I say something to Amber.
You do such a great job of it. You check in on me all the time. You comment, and your comments are meaningful. It's not like you're just like out here hearting things. Like you're like, girl, did you see the blah, 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 blah about the such and such? And I'm like, oh no, I didn't. Let me go look at that. Like you have really robust, connected like relationships. Like not just, I know this person, let me tap in. It's, I know this person, I know about you. Let me tell you the thing that I enjoy or I notice, or I'm going to respond to this post you put up because I know how this connects for you. That's incredible. A lot of people can't do that.
Well, I mean, I didn't really even see it as a skill, but in some ways as a family historian, as a genealogist, you have to be a connector.
Yeah.
Because you're like the heartbeat of your family. And you need all the systems working together in order for the heart to beat. Yeah. And so naturally I'm a connector, and I do that in my life. I do that in my family. It's like, oh, you know what? Is there anybody that lives in so-and-so? And I'm the one that's like, yep, this person's here.
Wow.
They live there. And our family history book is turned into like a yearbook in a way, where if you have like a young person who's interested in maybe going to a HBCU, you can look in that book and see all the people who've already gone to that school.
Wow.
Or if you want to pledge a sorority or fraternity, you can see everybody who has. If you want to go to the military, you can see who was in which respective branch. Like all of that is in there, and people like they flip to that index. Oh, wait a minute. Yep. You on page 325. Okay. Wow. And they just read from it. Honestly, that's what I wanted. When I first really started doing this seriously, I wanted people to be able to Google their name and find our family website, pull it up and see how they were connected. And if they wanted to see a death certificate of a great-great-grandparent or read an obituary or find out when the next reunion was going to be, that they had the ability to do that in one place.
Yes, I love that. I hope you're enjoying today's episode. And if you happen to also be looking for tools to help you navigate tough conversations, to be able to show up as a more impactful ally, or just to have resources about how to navigate equity in your world, I've written 2 books. My first book is called Allies and Advocates. And this book is really focused on helping you show up as a more impactful ally. It has actual tactics and tips and things that you can practice to help you get there, both for yourself and for others. My second book is called Say More About That. Now, Say More About That is more about helping you to speak up, to push back, to challenge, to be able to have those conversations that sometimes get a little bit difficult. And in fact, I've given you actual scripts to help you to be able to do that. So if you're interested in just having a few extra resources in your pocket to be able to help you to navigate any of those things, you can go pick up those books anywhere where you buy books, or you can pop down into the show notes and click the links and buy them there. Back to the episode. It's so privileged for you to know this much about your family. And I also know it's a privilege that you want others to experience. Can you talk about what people should be doing to start that? Because especially for Black and brown folks, and for those of us who, you know, descended from slavery or as a part of the slave trade came to be in this country, it can be like incredibly just intimidating to even think about, because you hear all these stories. And so part of you might be like, I don't even know if I want to go through the trauma, but also you're curious because you don't have a real sense of like, where am I from? How do you recommend people start?
The best thing that anyone listening or watching could do is talk and listen. And I really, really want to make this point. There are few times, especially in the 20th century, where the media or other people at large just sit and have conversations with Black people.
Oh my gosh.
Like, let me just hear your story. You know, you don't have to have done something in just outrageous or news or headline making, like just your story. And even the funny part about, like, you know, obituaries, where I talk about like how they have a standard set of things. They confess to hope in Christ at an early age.
Yes.
You know, they leave behind a cherished memory, born to the union of, right? Like we have all these things that you gotta put there. But that was one of the only ways that Black folks could tell the world about who they were and leave a mark.
It's so interesting that you said that, like, you want people to talk and listen, and you feel like we don't have enough stories, but we're in the era of like podcasting and like Instagram Live and like all of this like social tool. Like, it's surprising that it's like, it's not happening. But you know what I thought about, you know, that sometimes this floats around the internet where you see that conversation that was between James Baldwin and Nikki Giovanni.
Yes.
We don't have that.
That's what I'm talking about.
We don't have that.
That's what I'm talking about. It's just regular ass, just that, or
like, it's like cultural conversation,
right?
Like,
right.
Who I am, how I see
and how I see the world,
yes.
how I view things, and not only that, but just like when election season happens and people go to these diners and they talk to a specific demographic, but I don't ever hear that going to other places. That's true. And the visuals that go along with that, and sometimes you may see it on like TikTok where someone has like a grandparent or a great grandparent that's it's an advanced age, and they're just funny, or like, you know, they just have something about them that's like, that's, you know, and that's that person cataloging them. But we don't do that for all the elders in our lives. We don't, because we think they're going to be around forever. We forget that at some point we're going to become the OG.
Exactly. Well, you know, I'm having that moment right now. It makes me a little uncomfortable, you know, like I have these moments where people will bring things up and I'm like, oh shoot, you've never seen a telephone. Like in the house telephone. That's mind-blowing. Right, it's a thing. Right. So yeah, that is true. Okay, so we should do more talking and
listening and gathering. You know, so it's the listening, asking the questions. And for some people, they have to get permission to even ask the questions. Yeah. Like somebody has to say, it's okay for you to ask
to have the conversation.
Who's our family? Who's my dad? Who's my mom? Like, for some people, it's getting permission from themselves. Like, it's okay to search that out. But the conversations are important because once those people are gone, you can't get that information back. You know, there's a Alex Haley quote that every time a person dies, it's like a library burning down. And that's literally what it is like, genealogically
everything
speaking.
About them is gone. That's so true. You know, you know this. I lost my dad last year, right about this time. And my father was not very verbose. We've had that talk too. And so I didn't necessarily have a lot of information, but like, I did ask as much as I could. And then when his mother was alive, my grandmother, I also asked her a lot. But what I really uncovered was just in packing up his home, Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote a lot of things. He kept pictures. And then also other family members would send him pictures. Like I found an envelope that was my great grandmother's like handwriting that she had mailed to her mother.
Wow.
Like old school mail. Like it was in the envelope with a bunch of photographs in it.
Do you know that technology is being developed now where they can lift the DNA off of the envelope to test it?
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
okay, so
know,
that's
so
super.
if,
I have it. Obviously.
Right. So
I'm keeping it.
Keeping it. But like that's the thing. So if you don't have an elder to test,
yes,
you can potentially,
if you have items,
right? They're developing technology to be able to do that now, and because
we know you licked the envelope,
right?
Wow.
But the thing that's so powerful about that is like people who are currently living. Obviously, we have DNA from all of our ancestors, but the older people you go, the further you go back, the more close to the people who were alive during enslavement or had grandparents who were enslaved and all of that. I mean, that opens up the floodgates a little bit in terms of that kind of stuff. So that's
life-changing, actually.
It really is.
How many people have things that have just been handed down?
That part. And even like, technology they have for like where pictures were taken and kind of figuring out like, oh my gosh, that's here. And like, we're kind of in this like amazing renaissance with like a lot of this stuff that for a long time wasn't possible. Yeah. And at the same time, there still are things that need to come up to come up to a level, right as well.
I was incredibly impressed because I signed up for Ancestry because of you, and I did the test and all that, and I was blown away with just how many people that I am family with that were just curious about their family, right? Because we had like 4 or 5 different family trees, like that people had gone out to say like, okay, well, I'm gonna start the little piece that I know, and then there's a bunch of those, and you're like, oh, so this person and this person are on all of these. And you can put it together. That alone to me was incredibly mind-blowing.
Well, and it's the fact that enslavement and just our history here in the United States is in some ways was meant to keep us disjointed and not in community. And so now we have these spaces where you can, well, here's my little bit that I know. Right. And here's my little bit. Yeah. We're going to put it together.
And figure
out
something.
Bigger and better.
Yes.
And that's what I hope for, like, especially when folks DNA test or they start building trees. Again, I want them to find me. I want to reach out to them. I literally, like 2 days ago, there was a cousin that just came up in my matches and I was like, oh, we're connected by my great-great-great-grandparents. Like I already knew just based off of his name.
Wow.
And I know for him, I was like, let me not freak him out that I like know.
Right. Well, if he Googles you, then
he would know that I wasn't like this crazy
you're
lady.
Not weird. Right. But that would be weird to get into your inbox. I could see that.
Right. Like I was like, hey, I think we're connected because our last name is Bean. It's like not a common last name.
Exactly.
And so I was like, oh, it's gotta be my great-great-great-grandparents. Like I'll figure out how we're related. It didn't take me very long because I had already done the research.
Yes. So you had the map.
Right. So I already had it mapped out. And he was floored. Like, I can't believe you figured this out so fast. And I'm like, well, that's just, again, it's the privilege of your foundation not being 7 miles down under the ground, so to speak. It's, we're up in a skyscraper on some branches of my family. On others, we still underground. We trying to figure it out. Yeah.
Wow. Let me ask you this, because the last time I saw you, you were showing a preview of a movie that was so good. I mean, the movie couldn't have been more than 30 minutes, it feels like. It was such a short film.
It was 29 runtime.
Right. It was so short, but it was so good. And in the movie, and I want you to talk about it because I'm going to butcher the name, but it was so good because what you essentially did was find these people to say, hey, I found a relative of yours and I think it's important. And it really kind of centered around the Freedmen's Bureau.
Correct.
Can you share a little bit about that? Just also so people can go watch it because it was incredible. But the story itself also speaks a lot to what you're talking about, that uncovering.
Right. So the film's called A Dream Delivered, The Lost Letters of Hawkins Wilson. And just being a part of that production completely changed my life. And I've talked about that day. Like literally, I wrote a movie after I made this film. Like I didn't think that I could write a script.
Really?
And girl, no.
Nicka, please.
No, I'm so serious. like I did not.
You are a storyteller. You know all the stuff. You know who in your family sold bacon. You know who hid. We connected over bacon, girl. Come on. Like there's no way you could possibly think you couldn't write a movie script. That's amazing.
But I didn't think it was possible. But the thing, a lot of it is exposure, right? Like, you know, you don't really sometimes know what's possible until you get exposed to it. And until there are people who you're in relationship with who say, you like, yes, you can do this. Like, don't tap out.
Right.
You need the people in your life to tell you, like,
to give you the encouragement.
Right.
Yes.
Give you the encouragement.
Yes.
So with the film, mother and a daughter, basically I take them on this journey of learning about their ancestor who, that's the thing about that story is that Hawkins Wilson has been talked about for decades.
Yeah,
like if you Google his
wild.
name, it's just out there in the ether. One of the most well-known stories in the Freedmen's Bureau. And, you know, the team at Ancestry, you know, I mean, it took us a year to, you know, track down his descendants and try to find someone on the other side. And we're still working at trying to find more of the family. Yeah. But it was just the dream and the vision of one of my colleagues. I love this. It's my boo. I love Lisa Elsie. I got to give her a shout out because she's the one that just was like, we can do this and blah, blah, blah.
That story was so powerful. It was, again, less than 30 minutes. And I just remember I really might tear up. There's something so chemical about like, I'm going to tear up. Just like having a connection to who you are. You know what I'm saying? And so like what was so amazing about it was just this ability to like find these people who were living their regular everyday lives, weren't necessarily thinking much about their history. And then they uncovered this well of information that literally sends them on like trips and like, I want to investigate this and, oh, this makes sense. And then they actually met other people who are living now. Because we also think of this as a thing that's like, oh, it's just going to send me back into the past. Right. They got connected to people who are like here. Right now. And they like met each other and were like, oh my gosh, we're connected through this family. Again, I can't even talk about it without tearing up because it's incredible.
I will tell you that that's one of the aspects of the enslavement experience with Black folks that I think we don't think about. There are people back in Africa who are our family. Exactly. There are people here who are stateside. Yes. Who we don't know, who our ancestors were sold away from each other that are our family. Yeah. There are people in the Caribbean. Yep. That's another piece.
Yeah, that's a whole extra
that's a whole other thing. Like, remember I was talking about my family being like 7 miles down, right? I have aspects that one of mine is connecting to Jamaica. What? My people, no. What you mean? My people were in Louisiana.
Right, you're like, what is this random string?
How do I have Jamaican cousins? Wow. How do I have Jamaican cousins? Yeah. What is that? Especially when slavery ended a whole 30 something years earlier in Jamaica than it did in the United States. It did. Yes. So our story is expanding. It's broadening. It's reminding us that the world is way smaller than we think it is. And with that story, you don't have to have had a film made in order for you to take that journey.
That was the thing I felt like y'all highlighted really well. You made it really clear that like we are highlighting this story and this man, but like the point was really to say there's all this wealth of information available now that the Freedmen's Bureau, you know, archives are out. And so you can search in a way, because there was some deliberate intention taken with this information in a way that for Black and brown folks, we didn't have. And so like, that was definitely the centerpiece, but the experience of, I cannot fathom in my mind the feeling of meeting somebody and being like, yo, I'm connected to you and I know how. Right. And I'm willing to meet this utter stranger. And immediately I feel this like sense of like tie. So I feel like the film did a good job of like highlighting the story, but also highlighting like this isn't a one-off. This is an experience that is accessible to all of us. Hey there, I hope you're enjoying the episode. And in fact, if you are, you can bring me to your organization or event to help you bring conversations like this to life in your workspaces. This is something I do for a living. I do coaching, I do training, I do executive consulting, whatever it is that you might need as it relates to trying to figure out how to activate allyship or equity in your space. It's probably something I can support. So if you're interested in how we can work together, you can reach out to me at cabralco.com or pop down into the show notes and click the link, book a discovery call, and we will chat with you soon. Back to the show.
And the thing that's really, for me, the sort of ironic about this is I was with this mother and this daughter, and I still keep in contact with them.
Of course you do. Yes.
Like, I'm just very intentional about
you are, and you're great at it. So
I'm just like, but that was not the first time I've ever done that. Like that, I do that in real life.
Yes, that's
like
you. That's what you do.
That's what I do with people. Like, My cousin's sitting here. I met her because of an email.
Oh my gosh.
Literally. I met her because of an email.
You saw it. What was it? I saw the name and said, let me dig into that.
Well, no, what happened was, it's so interesting. We have a cousin group of just like girls. The majority have the names S's and J. I'm the odd one out with an N. And our moms were the keepers of the stories. We are all connected through our fathers.
Okay.
And our mothers were the ones that kept the stories. And my cousin's mom kept telling her about this ancestor she had that her father was named after. Through life, had kids, married, became a widow young and all of that. And one day she just decided, like, let me look into this thing that my mom told me about. And she came across me posting on a website talking about our shared ancestor. And that's the ancestor that was featured on Bass Reeves. It's the same person.
Wow.
Our ancestor is a character on Lawman Bass Reeves.
And it's also, you are, wow. Okay. I have several. Can I get the words out? So this underscores your point though, like that you have to talk. Right. You have to tell the stories. You have to share what you know. You need to post it or whatever. It needs to be available. It needs to be out because there. How else would anything have been uncovered if the stories were not out there?
Well, and the thing that was so funny about that email, she just like cold emailed me, and it was so interesting because
you're the perfect person to cold email,
right? Because I just do that.
Yeah.
But like she just laid out. She's like, she told me who her aunt was, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this person really is related to me because her aunt was someone I remembered as a child hearing about in the family. Wow. So we just kept up with each other and everything. And then like DNA came to the fore. She's like, well, I'm going to test. I'm like, but I already know if this is real because like all the names are adding up. Of course, she's right there in my results.
Exactly.
And it happened again. I posted a photo of my great grandmother and her sister-in-law on Ancestry and had someone message me. This is another cousin in the cousin chat now who had never seen a picture of her great grandmother from the front. She only had one of the like profile. And she was longing for this picture of her. And it was hilarious because she looks just like her. I'm like, look in the mirror. You're looking at her.
That's wild.
It is. It's
but totally that's probably why she's drawn to it.
Right.
Wow.
And so she just reached out and that's how we ended up. I mean, it's crazy. So I come from one of Ike's sons. My cousin, who I've been talking about very lovingly, my cousin Sheila, comes from another one of his sons. And then Joanna comes from his daughter. So that's how we kind of got Ike Rogers' children sort of back together was through cold emails and a photo on Ancestry. That's literally how random that was.
So I always ask you this question because I think it's an important one, especially for Black and Brown communities. And I love your answer. We have the reservations. We don't want to do the facial recognition. We don't want to put no pictures online.
I'm the same
way.
We're
things. Like, I don't know. So we have reservations about the DNA too.
Right. That's how I know I'm getting old. It's because, because you got to have a gut check every once in a while, right? Where it's like, I don't want to do that. Right.
I'm like, come on, Nicka. A lot of your stuff is available. Like, just because, of what you do.
Right. Yeah. Right. So the thing is, especially with DNA testing, there have been some very high profile things in the news over the last few months around that. And I always tell people, no matter if it's your DNA or if it's your personal data on a social media website, you have to be very vigilant about privacy and what your agreement is with whatever the company is, which you sign up on. And, I can't speak to anybody else. I can totally talk about, Ancestry. Right. That's a very important part of what we do is making sure that you know what your data is, what you have control over, how you control it, all of that. And with DNA, the one aspect I think that people are concerned about is like law enforcement access.
Oh, yes, I've seen that.
Like, oh, Lord, they're going to find. Okay, here's the thing. Ancestry doesn't allow law enforcement access.
That's important.
And if
it's a separate issue,
right. And if if law enforcement wants to get access to systems, they have to get a court order just like they would if it was not a website. Their legal that is like something that is at the utmost important. So,
I love that.
And I understand people's preoccupation or concerns about it, but I've seen also what it's done in my life, in my research. Right. And there are things that I would have never found.
Absolutely.
Had my family on both sides not participated in DNA.
Yeah.
And one side, it was like, I said, hey, we're doing this new thing. Are you guys interested? And they just, when I tell you we have like 130 people tested.
That's incredible. Because, folks are hesitant. I had to beg my dad. And he didn't do Ancestry. He did another one. But it was so much, and it was just this paranoia. But I don't want to call it paranoia because in a lot of ways it's justified. Like there's been a lot of trauma, and so like people have reason to be reserved about what. Like, you want me to give you what, you know?
Right.
So I understood, but like I know that there's so much value, particularly for girls. You need to have the men tested,
right? Because you're getting the Y,
yes,
and then also depending on what type of test you get, you can also get your paternal grandmother's direct line as well.
Oh, okay.
You know, because men have an X and a Y,
yeah.
And so the Y comes direct paternal, and then the X comes direct maternal. So,
oh, wow.
Right. So part of your X comes from your dad's mom.
That's right. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, we did get him to test one place, but you know, he's no longer with us, but you know, I'm keeping his things because now I know that
there may be other opportunities.
There may be other opportunities.
But I mean, literally I've had scenarios where like one of the biggest projects I've worked on is because of DNA, and I would have not found it because of DNA. Here I am, my family's from this little one horse town in Mississippi Delta.
Right.
Ain't nobody think about it.
Right.
And we share DNA with people across the river in Mississippi, and then further just along the Florida parishes in Louisiana. And why do we have these 3 distinct pockets? Like, what's up with that? And my hypothesis was it's probably slavery. Like, it's got to be slave related. Yeah. And that's what it was. And my goal is to by 2025 to get the database to 10,000 people, and I'm at about 8,500 right now.
That's amazing. Okay, so I have 2 questions. The first question is, when people are thinking about, like what you just said kind of stuck with me. I'm imagining what you're going to say, but I would like you to answer it still. When I get a piece of information, like, okay, we have people here, here, and here. I think a lot of us don't know what to do after that. What do? I call somebody? Do I reach out? What's the next step? But like you had, obviously because you are a genealogist, you were like, okay, let me try to make some educated guesses, right? Which is probably also, you love history. So you're aware of some of the historical, you know, implications of the, you know, the ways people end up in the places they are in. What do you recommend for someone who isn't going to have that foresight already?
You have to have your timelines together, you know? So when I'm looking at the 3 pockets of people and I'm looking about, you know, how much DNA are we all sharing? It's not like first or second cousin. It's like third, it's further. Right. You know, for me, my great-great-grandparents were enslaved, right? That means my mother's great-grandparents were enslaved. My grandmother's grandparents were enslaved.
Yep.
That's close.
Yeah.
We don't ever think about it from that vantage point.
But that's a reasonable, like, these are people that, you know, of course, depending on folks' age, that like you could have been in the world with.
You could have been in the world with, right? And so with that parameter, all right, so we're 3rd or 4th cousins. That would mean we share great-great or great-great-great-grandparents. That's taking me into the slavery era, which would justify 3 different locations. Yes. Well, how would it justify that? Slavery, especially in the Mississippi Delta, was an enterprise. There were a lot of absentee slaveholders, meaning people would live in one place and then have plantations in others that they didn't live there. They may not ever come there, but yes.
I've never even heard of this.
Oh, but
okay, so I'm like, so explain what now? The absentee slave. Wait a minute,
slaveholders.
Okay.
Oh yes, we're gonna roll up the sleeves.
Yes.
You don't have the downward expansion of the United States or the opening up of the Deep South without the Trail of Tears and the forced removal. Right. Okay. And the other thing that also comes into play with that are a lot of veterans of the War of 1812 and the Revolutionary War. Okay. One of the ways that they were compensated for their service was through land grants.
Okay, now I've heard that.
How do you get land grants unless you remove the people from the land in order for you to have free land?
Right.
Again, America 250 is about to come up in 2026. Yes. Let's have a conversation about land grants, forced removal, and then the down migration of enslaved people from the Upper South, which is Virginia, Maryland, North and South Carolina, down to the Deep South, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Tennessee, all these places. And so what happens, these plantations become huge. So where you might only have had maybe 100 or 200 acres in Virginia, you get a land grant in Mississippi and it's 2,000.
Wow.
And you need people to work all that land.
And so you got to move them.
Right. So that's how between 1830 and 1840, that decade is when you have the majority, a huge migration of enslaved people going from the Upper South to the Lower South. So you can kind of quantify when folks, so a lot of times when those of us that have Deep South roots, we start looking at our family history, you get back to 1870 and all you have is Virginia. Well, where?
Oh, okay.
Maryland. Where? It's a whole state.
Right.
So with the plantations that I'm talking about, again, absentee owners, you got free land.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't need to be there.
Right. So then you either live on one part and then continue to acquire land across the river on the other side. So if you're in Mississippi, you acquire plantations in Louisiana, vice versa.
Right.
And you might have 3, which in the instance of this slaveholder, they had 3.
Okay.
And that's how you have the 3 pockets of people related. They all come from
So you're
the
moving
same.
people to manage the land.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And with this population, I knew I was like, okay, these connections are coming like early 1800s. Like that's how far back this is in order for all of us to be manifesting this DNA. So if I find out who the eldest people are, that'll basically tell me the trajectory of everybody who's coming up in my matches. And that's exactly what happened. And the elders were all born before the founding of the United States. Some of them we know were born in Africa.
Yeah.
Like it flat out says that they were.
Right.
And their names,
wow, that's incredible.
and their names tell us that they were.
Okay.
And
wow.
Right. So it's
so much yummy information.
There's a lot of there, but what I've learned in researching this community is that like the remnants of these people who survived this transatlantic slave trade, like let's give them honor. Give that honor.
Yes, absolutely.
So they survived the transatlantic slave trade. They're brought together in these communities with people they don't know, and they make community for themselves, and their children intermarry, and then that's how we end up. And literally, our folks are still in Ventress and New Roads, Louisiana, New Orleans, Baton Rouge. I can tell you where everybody is at.
Right.
I'll find one obituary, and that'll send me to 100 people.
Wow. I've done work with Ancestry. Thanks to you. You've connected me with the people. And one of the things that, when I went in and trained for them, they handed me, and my boyfriend went with me. We both got a test, and I've done it. And so I was like, well, you take them, you and your dad should do it. And so one of the things that happened when they handed us the test was, we don't get your DNA. There was this deliberate.
There's a whole
Yes, they were deliberate. Like, I can't see it. Just so you know, it's still private. Right. What are some ways that we can just make sure, one of the things I do personally is when I meet someone that is curious about their backstory and is potentially open to DNA and maybe hesitant, or want someone that they, in my case, I want my father or my grandfather to do this, but they're nervous, right? What I usually do is, honestly, I send them your work. I'm like, oh, listen, please take a look at this, because it's so interesting, how much you can uncover. Right. And so that has been an incentive, but do you have any other recommendations to overcome that reservation? What you can say, do?
Usually, well, for me, it's relationship building. Yeah. Because if it's not the DNA, it's, I don't trust you to tell you my story, my information. It's all rooted in the same place of distrust, and recognizing that if I emote this out, or if I share it with you, you're going to do something positive with it. You're not going to use it against me. It's fear. A lot of it is rooted in fear. Yep. And so for me, if it's someone won't talk to me, I hear that all the time when I'm coaching people. I wish my aunt would say something. And I go, you got to cultivate that relationship. Yeah. Where she gets to a place where she is like,
she feels compelled. She's I got to tell you.
And it's not going to be trivialized. You're going to take it seriously. Yes. You have to nurture that relationship. Oh, I'm not above food bribery. People love food.
People do love food.
Listen, bring that pie over. Right. Cook that roast. Right. You know what I mean? Do whatever it is, because they need to know that you're invested in them. Yes. And I think I've mentioned the story to you before. I've been doing this for so long, and my own grandmother, I knew she was the funeral maven. We all have the funeral maven. The one lady in the family that goes to
every funeral, she's gone every funeral, and she has every obituary from the funeral.
What you said.
Yeah, I'm telling you, we all have that.
She was the maven.
Yes.
She would send us a stack of obituaries from Chicago every year. And I was like, Mama, who are these people? Right. We went to church with him. We blah, blah. Right. And so I knew I had made it when my grandmother gave me her obituaries.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's a stamp of approval.
Right. There, and it wasn't a conversation where she sat down with me and said, baby, it wasn't on soul food or something. Right. I'm gonna give you the
No, she was like, here, I'm gonna give you the information.
She just handed me, and it was the program for her father's funeral. I had never seen it.
Wow.
It was, scores of folks. And I was like, wow, I knew, then, okay, Granny, Granny gets it. This is
She
her
knows the
saying,
value.
this is her saying she trusts
Yeah.
what I'm doing.
That's
Later,
that's amazing.
you know, explaining a relationship in the family. My mom was attempting to do it. My grandmother told my mom to shut up and tell Nicka tell it.
Tell Nicka to do it.
Right. And I was like, oh my God.
That's amazing. That's super honorable.
Like, I was like, wow, okay, I made a granny. Like,
Yeah.
it was a thing, but I had to invest the time.
Yeah.
I had to show and prove that I wasn't here casually.
Yeah.
That I was here to preserve and you really have to do that meaningfully. And for some of the elders, you may be the only phone call from a young person that they get where someone is calling to check on them and see how they're doing. And I have my list of elders that I call. And unfortunately, throughout the years, that list is getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
And so
that library is every time a person passes a library burn, that is seared into my brain. Like, because there are, you know, again, just because I have recently lost my father, I understand like it is a treasure trove of information.
Right.
Because people keep things you just would never expect. Like, I found like old pay stubs from when he was like 20.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, I found receipts. My father had a Corvette before I was born, right?
Did you know this?
And I knew he had a Corvette, but I didn't know anything about it. It's just like a thing I heard. I found photos of the Corvette. I found repair receipts from the Corvette. So like, for me, just even that was amazing. But like, you know, again, going back to Hawkins' story, like I resonated so much with the idea that part of the reason that this is important is because it's still living, like it's still moving. And so they're really deliberate about, okay, even if we can't go back any further, we have enough where we should still be going forward. Let's at least get connected with who is around now, because our story is eventually going to be the story that other people are looking for.
And people are, again, it's like I said, at some point, you're going to become the OG.
Yep.
At some point, right? And where the future of all of this is in community research.
Yes.
It is no longer from the vantage point of my tree and my lineage and even with the old guard of genealogy, my patriot, right? It's we're no longer at that place.
Right.
Where we're at is where large scale projects are being built by regular everyday people or academics, where they are connecting living people to these events and things and communities that are historical. And, you know, at some point, there's going to be a time where, just like how I wanted my family to Google their name and pull up the website to our community, now it's no longer going to be that. It's going to be, oh my gosh, my ancestor was enslaved by St. Louis University, or my ancestor was enslaved and lived at Montpelier, or my ancestor was survived the Tulsa Race Massacre.
Right.
That's where we are. That's that's the foundation of where, like, it's shifting.
It's a lot of information now.
Yeah.
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 That's incredible. Okay. Photography.
my other life.
Right. You're right. Because, you know, you are multi-hyphenate. Talk to me about your passion for photography. Obviously, we know it's going to connect to the storytelling, but I specifically wonder, like, you know, because you're a historian, you're collecting data on people's histories and your own family history and helping others uncover that. What role does photography play in that?
Oh my gosh.
That's why I had to ask the question.
Well, I mean,
is yummy.
Because the thing is, one of the things that folks like often seek are photos of their family.
Yes.
I don't think they realize that for a lot of people, getting your picture taken, or as they would say, getting your picture made was a big deal. And for those of us that have deep South roots, sometimes the first picture you have of your family would not be until they made it to Chicago. And they would sit for a portrait and they would send it back home to all the people that were there. So you'd see, and
the very perfect
they
prim.
got their Sunday best on,
exactly,
and all of that. And so people are constantly searching for photos. Unfortunately, like with my family, I remember hearing about the same granny with the funeral program. She played basketball. I didn't know that. She told me about the fact that she played basketball. And that grandmother was born in 1916. So think about her being in...
where was she even allowed to play basketball?
Listen, and the fact that they had to apologize in front of the church because they were girls playing basketball, my grandmother refused.
Come on, Granny.
Listen.
That's in your DNA. That's
come on
good.
now.
That's I like
it really
that.
Is.
That little rebelliousness, that's nice to know.
It is. It's there. It's there, but I bring up that story because there were photos of her in her little basketball attire.
Like her
but they went up in a house fire. There was even a family Bible
That's heartbreaking.
that had all the stuff in there.
Oh, wow.
My great-grandfather told, come down here and get this stuff. My grandmother, they're up in Chicago and Detroit and all the places, living their lives. Oh,
right.
Come and get it. And then he burnt the house down. So like, that's why it's the beauty of our environment now is you can upload it and scan it. So if it gets lost or whatever, somebody's got it. So people are constantly looking for photos. And for me, especially if I'm photographing a wedding, I want to get all the generations in one photo because a lot of people don't think about if there are 4 generations here, like let's have that captured or the bride with her grandmother or, you know, even like recreating pictures. People love to do that now too.
I like to see that too.
I like the 80s ones personally.
Yeah, the 80s ones are good because they have the outfits are hilarious.
Right. And you know, and I'm talking like when they were
square. Yes. A lot of them had that little sepia like tint. Yes.
Or if you old enough, your picture to start turning colors.
Yes, exactly.
Because of the processing.
Yes, and then the ones that have the little like it'll say APR and 81
right
like in the corner. Yes,
like Olin Mills.
Yes,
all
exactly,
the right.
exactly. Yeah, they'll have all kinds of records in that way.
Right.
Yes.
So I'm constantly looking for photos and pictures, and then I, you know, even some people now where you don't have images of people. I've worked with one of my photography buddies, Takesha Jefferson. She's incredible with how she reimagines like historical images, but she creates them a lot of times using her own children, but she's learned how to use sort of like AI to replace different features. So it's not her kids. Wow. But it looks like wet plate photography. And, you know, she even imagines her ancestors and different people in her lineage. When we were doing a show for Black ProGen, we did, I think 4 shows where we did the family histories of people who had been lynched or had suffered through racial violence. And we didn't have pictures of these folks. So I said, hey, I want a visual to show. Can you create something that would stand for this person? And she did it in her backyard with her phone. Like, wow. And it's nuts. Like when you see, you're like, you did this with your phone. And most of the time she's using her phone. So the benefit of you being a genealogist is obviously when you're taking pictures, you're thinking about that. Yes. You're thinking about the legacy that's being left. You're thinking about the stories that will be told. You're thoughtful about who's being captured. Right. Are you telling people this? Like, are you letting people know when you're doing it? Like, hey, I just want you to know, like, these are the people that you have in this photo. No, I feel like I would be so compelled to encourage people to keep this, be thoughtful about it. I think one of the ways that I do that is I'm like, be mindful, print. So many people do not print images anymore. It's in a phone. It's in a cloud. And you kind of need both. You kind of need both. Because I mean, and I don't. You lose that phone, it's over. You lose the phone, it's over. Or not only that, but like, you know, I have a niece who's 17, and it hit me when she was younger because I was like, where are all my pictures of her? Like we've got like school photos, but like the candid, like and I'm like, it's all on a device. Yep. And so you have to be mindful about printing, making sure you're printing on like archival paper so that it doesn't disintegrate. That's a good point. Like, you know, when you get albums and things printed, like to be mindful that it's on archival paper and acid free and how you store things. I mean, you know, that's a whole other podcast about like storage and all that kind of stuff. But when I'm taking the images, a lot of times, like most of the time I'm there for the moment. Like I'm there to capture the moment. And especially if it's a wedding, the bride and the groom are not. Yeah, they're consumed. But I mean, you know, I figure when you sit, not maybe in the moment, but like when you sent them their photos, I may have like added a little blurb in there, like, just so you know, this is important. But you know what? Usually what I do is I will, just because I'm like an in the moment person, the password is always going to be something that happened. Oh, I love that. I always do that. And they'll be laughing like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about that. Yeah. And I love to see what they find when they start going through the images. Yeah, I love that. And usually they'll say, I can't believe you oh caught my gosh, this. Yes. It's the element of surprise with that for me. And I definitely think I got that from my dad because one of the things he did leave me was, and this is also an admonishment, you can't always be the person taking the pictures. At some point, be in them. You've got to be in them. So my dad was always the one with the camera. So you don't have always a lot of photos of him. Right. Because he was always taking pictures of other people. But then his aesthetic was like everyday life. And so I have pictures of my dad shaving. Oh, wow. In college at Clark Atlanta. Oh, wow. Like,
okay.
He's on campus. I have pictures of my father leaving to go to school from
So
Chicago.
he was a photographer as well then?
Yes.
Okay.
He was. Like,
because I'm like, why would you have a picture of yourself shaving?
It was
like old school selfies.
And so my dad even at one point had all the equipment to like develop. He was supposed to teach me how to do that before he died. We never got a chance to do it.
Wow.
So like I have his cameras, like I have my great-grandparents' cameras. Like I have a ton of like different historical things like that. But he loved that. And then there's like, my father even got into video. So I have video of my grandparents, and my dad is like 19, 20 years old, like his first like camcorder, like images of my older siblings, videos. And so because I'm the one that has all of it, I'm sending them to my siblings, and they're like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen this in so long.
Wow.
So there's something to be said about being the keeper of the stories, right? Whether it's the moving images, the still images, or the documents, and bringing all this stuff together. Yeah,
the richness of all of this is just so fantastic. Okay, I would love for you to tell us what Black ProGen is, and then I have one more question.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, Black ProGen is it's a collective of family historians, genealogists from silent generation and baby boomers all the way down to millennials and Gen Z. And we just kind of get together and talk about nerdy genealogy stuff. But what's interesting is, it's been a while since we, recorded like one of the last episodes, but people are still finding this little show on YouTube. And like, I'm amazed because I'll get an email from people like, oh my gosh, I watched this. And I'm like, but that's the timelessness of it and the fact that it's still helping people. And it's more than 130 episodes. And
it's a ton of episodes out there.
I was like, how did, like, when you're in the moment and you're
it doesn't feel like that.
It doesn't feel like
well, it does for me. but yes, there will be a moment where it won't feel
there will be a moment where it's not going to feel like that. And you're going to forget, but that's the beauty, is that people, it's still helping people. It's still timeless. It's been all those years. It's still funny. It's still, still has all the crazy stuff going on. But the thing is, we all came together to do it because we noticed that there wasn't a voice like that where you could hear
valuable.
Us. Right. You could hear us, compare, like Tupac and Biggie to like different situations. And people would know what we were talking about.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes. I love that. Right. Okay. So I asked this question. There's so many other things I could ask, but I'm going to be respectful of your time today. Only today.
Only today.
If it were another day,
Only
I might
today.
not be so respectful. But
Only
today, I'll be respectful. So I ask everyone this question in the podcast, and it's because the show's called Guilty Privilege, and I call it that because tends to be that people think of privilege as something to feel bad about, or they hide it, or they're defensive about it. And so what I'm hoping to accomplish with this show is to help people understand that like privileges can look all kinds of ways. It's not the stuff that you necessarily immediately think of, but even if it is those things can be used to help create connection and impact. And I feel like you've touched on like literally the way that could show up in this entire conversation. So my question for you is, what is one privilege that you have that you refuse to feel guilty about?
I would say one privilege that I have that I refuse to feel guilty about is being a connector. Because it's not for my edification. It's to help other people. It's to sow into their lives. And that's really what I've been put on earth to do.
Yeah.
Yes, the storytelling is like a really big part of that, but it's to, if you need the right shade of red lipstick, and I know somebody that just started a company that has that shade, I'm going to say, Amber, oh my gosh, here's this thing. Or, oh my gosh, okay, we're having a family reunion in Detroit. We are.
Well,
it is.
I should probably come.
You should probably
explore,
come.
Right? Yeah.
But like, oh, there's this thing. Okay, Amber mentioned this, blah, blah, blah. Like, here, let me slide it to my cousin. That's my role. I will never ever feel horrible about it because it's not for me. That's my act of service to other people.
Yep. To open the doors. I love that. Thank you so much for joining me, Nicka. We could have talked for another 40 minutes.
We really could.
I appreciate all of this. I hope it helps people think more critically about, particularly in the day and age where it's so readily available for us to capture things. I hope that people walk away with at least the thoughtfulness of like, this could literally be history, and be more thoughtful about, capturing and printing, and it's definitely changed my mind about that. So I really appreciate it.
I'm glad it seeped on through.
Yeah, definitely did.